all off the hook tonight. I'm not going to call on anybody. What's going to happen tonight is I'm going to talk about how you take your law degree and you turn it into a brilliant career. Now, I'll tell you what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a little while, and I'll talk about everything. We'll talk about resumes, we'll talk about interviews, we'll talk about how you find jobs that don't come on campus to find you, which is most jobs, of course, and then we'll do question and answer. I encourage you to ask me questions. I have done this seminar over 500 times around the country. I routinely visit about 100 law schools a year, and I promise you, you will not ask me a question I haven't heard somewhere else. One of my favorite all-time questions, a law student in Florida, she raised her hand and she said, I was a Hooters girl before law school, should I put it on my resume? My answer was something like, it depends what you want to do after law school. I had a student in one school I visited ask me, how do I network my way into the CIA? Well, that's a good question, you know. They don't publish lists of who works there. I had a student in Albany ask me a question I don't get very often. He raised his hand and he said, have you ever had a real job? Well, that's a good question. I have written a whole bunch of things. I've written a study aid, some of you may know. I wrote Law on a Flash. I have built flashcards in the yellow boxes. I've written screenplays. I've written travel articles. I've written books about job search. I have never had a law-related job. Why should you be listening to me? Well, fortunately for all of us, it has nothing to do with my own career. It has everything to do with how I go about writing my books. When I wrote Guerrilla Tactics, that we'll be talking about today, I called law schools around the country, and I said, tell me how your students get great jobs. No, I'm not talking about people at the top of the class. I'm not talking about people on law review. I am not talking about the kind of student who can go into interviews, throw up on the interviewer, it has happened, and get jobs anyway. How did the rest of us go about getting great jobs? They told me hundreds of stories I put in that book. When I wrote my book, America's Greatest Places to Work with a Law Degree, again I called law schools around the country, and I said, tell me where your happy graduates work. A couple of very distinguished law schools in New England, where I live, said, Kim, we don't have any happy graduates. Everybody else did, and I wrote about those places. So when I talk about getting a great job, fortunately for all of us, I won't be sharing with you my own career. It wouldn't do you any good. But I will be sharing with you great stories I have heard from smart people all over the country. And the good news is this. I don't care what you think may be holding you back from getting a great job. 45 minutes from now, you will see that there is always a way to get a job you love. Now, I want to tell you, if you need to leave here today for a class before I finish, before we get to question and answer, I want to leave you with my email address, which you are free to use now and for the rest of your career. It's a very easy email address to remember. It is jobgoddess, one word, 2 D's, 2 S's, at AOL.com. Now, I want to start off by giving you a hypothetical. Now, my hypothetical is a lot different than the ones you get in class. I remember law school very well, so I don't call on anybody. But what my hypothetical is going to do is it's going to summarize for you the theme of everything I'm going to tell you today. Now, in my hypothetical, you are no longer in law school. You are a legal employer, and I'm the one who's back in law school, and I want a job from you. And I send you my resume, and on my resume, you see that I'm in the bottom 10% of my class, and I don't really have anything else on there. Now, barring anything else, and that's a key phrase, barring anything else, are you going to be terribly interested in bringing me in for an interview? Probably not. Now, is it because I believe you're typecast by your grades? I completely don't believe that, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about grades. You know, I don't know if you heard President Bush's comments at the Yale graduation a couple of years ago. He said, to those of you who are graduating as A students with honors and awards, I applaud you. For those of you who are graduating as C students, I say to you, you too can be President of the United States of America. Your grades will not determine your career, but what's the problem with my resume? You are going to have serious questions over whether I'm going to be able to do for you the work you want me to do and whether or not I'm motivated to do it. Now let's change the facts a little bit. Let's say I am still at the bottom of my class, but this time when I send you my resume, my grades aren't on it. But on it, you do see that I spent maybe a semester working for a judge, maybe a summer working with the Department of Justice or the SEC or the State Attorney General's office. And attached to my resume, you see glowing letters of reference from those two employers. Are you suddenly going to be more interested in talking to me? Of course you are, and why is that? Regardless of what my grades are like, two employers you really respect have great things to say about what I can do. And isn't that the only point of grades? To show that I can do the work. Now, you need to know, if you don't know already, that virtually every judge, every state agency, every federal agency in America, they all hire law students, both during the year and during the summer. Now, admittedly, some of these jobs are volunteer jobs, and I know that the word volunteer is a dirty word in law school, but I'm going to tell you, if you spend even a semester, even part of a summer, doing one of these jobs and they say great things about what you can do, that's often all you need to open other doors for you. Let's change the facts again. Let's say that I don't send you anything, but you have decided that you want to hire a law student. And just as you are about to go through the 3,000 unsolicited resumes you've had emailed to you, you get a phone call from your friend Libby Zabiblinek. And Libby says, I know you're looking at hiring a law student. I was just at a CLE. We'll talk about CLEs in a few minutes. For right now, you need to know, continuing legal education seminars, practicing attorneys have to take them to maintain their license to practice law. I was just at a CLE. I was sitting next to the student from Brooklyn. She was a ball of fire. If you're going to hire anybody, you have to talk to her first. Now I have a question for you. What is going to make a bigger impact on you? Whatever is in those 3,000 unsolicited resumes or the one phone call? It's the phone call. You know this intuitively. You know that in your life, you pay more attention to people than you do to paper. You know that if we're friends and I say to you, I just tried this great new restaurant, Le Petit Cochon, you have to give it a try, you will try that restaurant long before you try one you find in the yellow pages. Now, what is tying together what I just told you? It's the idea of image and message control. What determines the opportunities that you get now and for the rest of your career is not completely dependent on your grades or what you look like on paper. It depends on the image you create for employers and the way they get your message. What I'm going to train you to do in every aspect of your job search, now and forever, is to create the image that gets you the opportunities that you want. Now, a couple of things about this idea of image and message control. Some of it's obvious. If your email address is spankboy@AOL.com, don't put it on your resume, right? If your answering machine message at home says, what's up, dog, I'm out partying, leave me a message, don't leave it there for when employers call you. On top of that, image control means you don't say everything. I often say resumes and interviews, they are not confessionals. The idea is not to lie, but to remember in every instance what we're going to show employers is the best thing about you, so that in interviews, when they say, why do you want to work for us, your answer is not, well, I'm not so sure I do. That may be the way you really feel, but that's not what we're going to say. Another thing about image control, a lot of times students will say to me, Kim, image control, message control, is that kind of skeevy? Is that kind of manipulative? I want to point something out to you, whether you recognize it or not. In your entire life, you've been practicing image and message control without even realizing it. For those of you who are single, it's probably most of you. I've been married about 4 years now. For those of you who are single, what would happen if you went out on a date with somebody for the first time and they said to you, thank God you agreed to go out with me. The last 50 people I asked out, they rejected me. Don't say it, even if it's true, right? If any of you are married, you know marriage is the ultimate test of message control. When I say to my husband, honey, do you think I'm putting on weight? What do you think he says to me? He says, well, how do you feel? Are your clothes getting tight? Now, why does he do that? Well, presumably because he loves me and he wants me to be happy, which is why he doesn't say, geez, about time you notice you look like a manatee, right? Image and message control. I'm going to train you to do something that you do naturally to get great opportunities now and forever. Now, you may be thinking, she is going to make me do things that are going to make my skin crawl. Absolutely not true. I am going to teach you to do things that are strategic, that you'll enjoy, and that are easy. That'll get you the things you want to do. I'll tell you a story about this that highlights this. About a law student going to law school in Florida. She didn't do well undergrad. Law school has not started off on a merry note for her. Now, if she wants to get into international law, what does she do? She does something I encourage all of you to do, and it's easy. She keeps up with the local newspapers to see if there is anything coming to town related to what she wants to get into, international law. Now, she notices there's going to be a meeting of the Organization of American States taking place in the city where she's going to school. Now, what does she do armed with that? She does something else I strongly encourage you to do. When there is anything coming to town related to what you want to get into, find out who's organizing it, call and volunteer to help out. Well, she finds out with this meeting of the Organization of American States coming to town. She calls and she volunteers to help out. She winds up acting as a gopher for the person organizing this meeting of the OAS. Now, in that capacity, she meets an awful lot of people. She makes a point of doing something else I strongly encourage you to do. When you go to an event related to something you want to do, work into the conversation that this is something that you want to do with your career and ask for advice about breaking into it. Now, one of the people that she meets at this meeting of the OAS says, well, I can help you get to Washington for the summer. How would you like to spend the summer working as a White House intern? It wasn't that famous White House intern, okay? So she goes to the White House for the summer. Needless to say, while she's there, she meets a ton of people. And she tells all of them she wants to get involved in international work. One of them says, well, I can help you out next summer. How would you like to spend next summer working at the U.S. Embassy in Barbados? Not a bad little summer job, right? Now, what I didn't tell you about this student is more important than what I did tell you. Did I tell you about her fabulous paper credentials? She didn't have them. Did I tell you about her amazing connections? She didn't have those either. She did simple, strategic things to put her in a position to get the job she wanted. I'm going to train you how to do exactly that. Now, the central element of your image, no matter whether you want a law-related job or not, and every job you look for the rest of your life, you know, on average when you get out of law school, you'll have 16 different jobs. These skills are things you're going to use forever. The central element of your image, no matter what job you want, is always going to be the same. And in order to illustrate it again, I'm going to give you a hypothetical where, again, you are going to be a legal employer, and again, I'm going to be back in law school. This time, let's talk about the letter that I sent you. I sent you a letter, and my letter says, Dear hiring partner, I'm currently in law school at Brooklyn Law School. I'd like to start my career with you, because I believe by working for you, I'll hone my ability to deal with clients, I'll learn how to behave in court. I. What's the matter with my letter? Do you care about me? I think you assume that working for you would be a great opportunity for me. You need to hear how what it is I bring to the table is going to help you accomplish what you want. That is why it is so crucial. In every contact you have with employers, the focus has got to be on them and how you'll help them accomplish what they want. That's why it's so crucial. When you send letters to employers, you show them you've been to their website, you've been to career services, you've talked about what they look for in people they hire and how you'll fit in. Now, you may be thinking, well, geez, thanks, Kimbo. Exactly what do I bring to the table for employers? Regardless of what experience you have or don't have, you are capable of showing employers the single element that ultimately distinguishes people who get great jobs from people who don't, and it's simple. Enthusiasm, enthusiasm. They need to see that you want the job. You have heard a poisonous myth about job search. We've all heard this, right? You know how he got that job? He pretended he didn't want it. You know, that idea of playing hard to get, it works great when you date. It does not work when you are looking for a job. In interviews, smile, seem interested, ask questions. Even the very words, I know I don't have experience doing this, but this is a job I really want, and I will work hard to reward your confidence in me, can work like magic. I'll tell you a story that highlights this. Law student I talked to in Milwaukee, his dream was to get into the Navy JAG. It's a great job. He applied for an on-campus interview, and he didn't get it. Now, he did something in the Guerrilla Tactics book. He sat outside the interview room for a couple of hours so that every time the Navy JAG interviewer came out, he saw the student sitting there. And after he saw him a couple of times, he said, you know, are you waiting for me? And the student said, you know something? I'm dying to get into Navy JAG. I didn't get an on-campus interview. I was hoping you might have a few extra minutes to talk to me. And that guy said, I'm sure I will hang around. Well, he hung around. He wound up going in and talking with this guy. And while he's in there talking with the guy, he says, you know something? Would it be possible for me to come down and shadow you for a day, see more of what you do? Many employers will allow you to do that. Gives you a good idea of what they do. Now, this guy says absolutely, sets it up. He meets everybody this guy works with. They all encourage him to apply for his commission. He applies, and he gets rejected. Feel a little betrayed, right? He gets a call that day from the JAG recruiter. He said, did you hear about your commission? I said, well, yeah, thanks a lot. I didn't get it. The recruiter said, don't worry about that. We all got rejected the first time. Apply again in 3 months. Well, he applied again in 3 months, and he got it. Well, obviously, he got it. I wouldn't be telling you the story if he didn't, right? He gets his commission. Why am I telling you this story? This guy didn't even have enough to get an on-campus interview, let alone get the job. What did he have other than enthusiasm? That's so important to show in every aspect of your job search. Now, what can get in the way of your enthusiasm in a hurry? Something you're going to be surprised I'm discussing before we talk about resumes or interviews or anything else, but it is crucial to a successful job search. It is handling rejection. everybody's favorite topic. You know, for the last couple of years as I've been traveling around the country, law students ask me everywhere about the job market. My attitude about the job market is always the same. The only job market that counts is your personal job market. If you get a job, the job market is brilliant, right? If you don't get a job, who cares who else is employed, right? The fact is, in a less than robust job market, which this clearly is, all it means is you get a bit more rejection before you get the job you want. You will get that job if you know how to tolerate rejection in the meantime. Two things about rejection that I want you to remember now and for the rest of your career. Number one, when you get rejected, don't assume they hated you. Don't assume there's something wrong with you. Don't assume since they looked at your resume or interviewed you, they have fashioned a voodoo doll out of you and they're sticking pins in it behind your back. When you get rejected, you have no idea how close you came to getting that job. You might have been this close. And I know lots of law students who've gotten the job of their dreams after they were rejected from it. Because instead of going and drowning their sorrows in happy hour, they contacted the employer again and they said, you know something? I'm disappointed I'm not going to be working with you now. But if your needs change, and needs do change, more business comes in, budgets open up, people don't show up, they don't work out, they get abducted by aliens, things happen. If your needs change, I hope you'll reconsider me, and they do get reconsidered, and they do get those jobs. The most important thing you can do for the vast majority of jobs, public interest jobs, government jobs, small firms, the most important thing you can do is every few months, contact the employer again and let them know you are still interested. Ask them if things have changed, because those jobs do not open up on a regular basis. And if you keep your name in front of them, you're likely to get that opportunity. The other thing to remember about rejection, when you get rejected, it is way too easy to cloak employers with magic powers they don't have. It's way too easy to think they looked at your resume or interviewed you, and when they reject you, it's because with their laser vision into your soul, they know you aren't good enough. Don't kid yourself. Employers who are honest will tell you they know hiring is highly imperfect. Don't give them the power to convince you you can't get what you want, because they don't have that power. If you don't give it to them, don't give it to them. Why am I hammering you about rejection before we talk about anything else? Because I have seen all over the country that the single thing that stops more students from anything else from getting a job that they love is a fear of being told no. Remember, when you get rejected, it's on the basis of very skimpy information, a stinking one-page resume, a 20-minute interview. You are a much more interesting, complex, dynamic human being than you can get across in that. Don't give them the power to convince you you can't get what you want, because they don't have that power over you if you don't give it to them. Don't give it to them. You know, everybody has been rejected. If you think you know people who haven't been rejected, you don't know them well enough to know their directions have been. I speak at Harvard Law School every year. Students there get rejected. Are they pissed? But they get rejected. I've been rejected a million times. You know, I mentioned to you that I've written some movie scripts. I've actually written 14 feature-length screenplays. My dream is to win an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. But you may have noticed you've never seen me at the Oscars, and there's a good reason for that. I have noticed that people who win my Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, their odds seem to improve dramatically if they can actually convince a movie studio to make a movie out of one of their scripts, which I have learned the hard way is an awful lot more difficult than actually writing these darn things. The first time I ever sent a script out, it was my first one. I mean, it was hardly dry. I had it in an envelope on its way to an agent in Los Angeles, and I was ready. I could see myself at the Oscars in some slinky outfit, you know, thanking the members of the Academy. I had my speech written. I got that script back a week later in an envelope with a note attached to it, and the note said, "Dear Miss Walton, enclosed, please find your script." I was not sufficiently enthralled to read past page 10. It was a 120-page script. However, I encourage you to send your scripts to other agents because I'm confident you'll find somebody whose standards are considerably lower than mine. My family had to hide sharp objects from me for about a month after that. It's been years and I'm still sending out scripts. Why? Because I want to win an Oscar. And if I stop sending my scripts out, what is the only thing I'm guaranteeing? That I'm never going to win. I don't care what job you want. I don't care about your grades. I don't care about the job market. I don't care how many people tell you you can't get it. You will have that job long before I win my Oscar, right? But you know what that is? Because there are only two things you can ultimately do with rejection, aren't there? You can accept it, and you can believe it, and you can internalize it, and you can quit looking. And you can sit at home, and you can drink beer, and eat cheese puffs, and watch reruns of The Apprentice for the rest of your life. Nobody's going to stop you. Or you can acknowledge what you know in your heart of hearts is true. You know there's not just one job that's going to make you happy. There are hundreds of jobs that will make you happy, and there are hundreds of ways to get those jobs. We'll talk about those. And the only way to get revenge on employers who reject you is to go on and live that happy life. That is within your control. I went to Case Western Reserve for law school. It was the second year there. I nailed down a summer job with a relatively large law firm. They had 22 summer clerks. At the end of the summer, they extended offers of permanent employment to 21 of the 22. I was number 22. Yeah, I came up in interviews once in a while after that. Came up every night over the dinner table with my parents for the next 5 years, right? But in the mysterious way the Lord works, guess which law firm does not appear in my book, America's Greatest Places to Work with a Law Firm? Things are a little different now, aren't they? Now, in all fairness, I did talk to associates there who hated. I didn't besmirch my integrity. But what's my point? Rejection does not define your career unless you allow it to. Don't allow it to. There's always something to do to get a job you love. Now, having said that, in order to form the right image and control the right message, you need to know what employers ultimately want from you, and it's easy not to get this right. When it boils down to it, employers can only want two things from you, and every aspect of your job search is going to focus in on one of them. Now, the first one is fairly obvious. They need to know that you can do the work, obviously, right? The mistake we make in law school is we assume that our grades are the thing that show them that. And where do we get that from? Gee, I don't know. Job postings that say we want top 5% of the class, top 10%, top 15, top 20. Start thinking grades are the only thing that show them. Not true. Remember that for everything that grades can show an employer, there is a non-grade alternative that you can use to show them that's the same thing. Let's talk about writing ability. A lot of employers want to see that. Are grades the only thing that show them that? Clearly not. What else can you do? I mentioned the idea of working for a judge, even for a semester. If a judge raves about your writing ability, very few legal employers will disagree with them, right? What else can you do? Writing competitions. You'll see posters at school all the time for writing competitions. When I was at Case Western, I was not bother with those. They just get thousands of entries. I can't win. You know, I have since come to find out that most writing competitions get no more than 3 or 4 entries. 3 or 4. Are you kidding me? If you don't send in your entry in crayon, you're likely to win, right? You want a writing competition, who's going to question your ability to write? Nobody. Another one. This one works like magic, and very few law students take advantage of it because it's not one that comes to you intuitively. This is what you do. Anything you're even slightly interested in doing, go to Career Services and find the name of an alum who practices in that specialty, and you contact that alum and you ask them a very enticing question. Ask them what issue they would like to read more about. Now, when you ask a practicing attorney that, you know what you're really asking them in disguise? You're giving them free research, right? Very nice for a lawyer. Now, when they give you an issue they'd like to read more about, what do? You get online, research it for a couple of hours, write a simple one-page article about the status of the issue. Now, what do you do with that? You need to know that virtually every legal publication in America, outside of scholarly things like law reviews and law journals, almost all ABA publications, state bar publications, local bar publications, newsletters, they are crying out for content. They're begging for stuff to publish. I guarantee you you'll be able to get it published. Now, what does this get you? Well, number one, on your resume, it gets you a publication. Took you virtually no time to do, proves your ability to write. On top of that, it gives you a killer writing sample, which doesn't just show that you can write, but proves your enthusiasm for what you want to do. Now, you know, I could go on and on about this, but you see what I'm talking about. For everything that grades can show an employer, some non-grade alternative can show them the same thing. Now, having said that, traditionally, when we think about showing employers what we can do, we think about our resumes. Now, I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes on your resumes because you'll have lots of panels and programming here, lots of opportunities to work on it. What I'm going to talk about is something you don't often hear about, which is your resume as it relates to your image. It's important with resumes, certainly based on the questions I get, to take a step back and remember the roles your resume plays. Your resume is not an obituary. It's not a tribute to things you've done. It's a marketing piece, Its only goal is to get an employer to bring you in for an interview by showing them that based on what you've done, be it volunteer or paid, part-time or full-time, law-related or not, that you have the skills and qualities they look for in people they hire. Now, what does this tell you? It tells you if you're looking for different kinds of jobs, you are going to have a wardrobe of resumes. That's why God invented word processing, right? What I would encourage you to do is to have what I would call a master resume, and on your master resume, disgorge everything you've ever done, every club you've ever belonged to, every role you've ever played, and every organization you've had anything to do with, and don't send it to anybody. Instead, for any employer you're looking at applying for a job from, go to Career Services, go to their website, look at what they look for in people they hire, and make sure that on your resume, the things that show that move up over to the left margin and you go into more detail about them. If necessary, divide your resume into related experience and other experience. Now, what does this mean? Well, large law firms, research and writing ability, obviously. Public interest. Let's say that you wanted to be a child advocate. The key thing there in public interest jobs, showing your dedication to the cause. All of a sudden, your summer camp counseling jobs are going to rocket up on your resume. It shows your dedication to working with children. If you want a non-traditional job, it's crucial that you change your resume so that what will be important to them is at the top of your resume. Let's say you wanted to go into advertising. All of a sudden, anything you had done promotionally for any programs at school, any fundraising, those kinds of things, those would move up because they would need to see those. The key thing is make sure that what they'll want to see is towards the top of your resume. Now, you may be thinking, well, thanks a lot, Kim. What if I don't have anything related on my resume? A great way to get related experience on your resume like that is to take advantage of the very first thing I told you about, CLEs. If you don't know about them, continuing legal education seminars. Here's what you need to know. Practicing attorneys have to take them to maintain their license to practice law. You need to know they are given in every specialty under the sun. I don't care if you want sports, entertainment, international, transactional litigation. They give them all the time. They give them constantly in Manhattan, constantly in Brooklyn, constantly all over the place in New York, and all over the country. You can find out about them through Career Services, local bar association, the Practicing Law Institute, which you'll find online. You need to know that they're given at convenient times. They're very short. They normally last just a couple of hours. And best of all, as law students, you can generally get in for free on scholarship. Practicing attorneys pay a lot for these. You don't pay anything. Now, why am I such a big fan of CLEs? A couple of non-resume reasons. Let's pretend for a moment that you aren't exactly sure what you want to do with your law degree. I'll bet that's one or two of you. And you know how I know that? You know that only 1 out of 3 law students even comes to law school convinced they want to be a lawyer? If you don't know what you want to do, you're in a very big, silent club. How can CLEs help you? Go to a CLE about something you think sounds kind of interesting to you, and while you're there, remember that everybody in the room was once in your shoes. They will sympathize with you. And when there's a break in the action, be perfectly honest with people around you and say, you know something? I'm still in school. I'm trying to decide what to do with my law degree. Can you tell me what you enjoy about doing this? Why is that such a key question? You know the job you like has nothing to do with the name on the door. It has nothing to do with the paycheck, hard as that is to believe. Has very little to do with the specialty. Has everything to do with the people you work with and how you fill your day. And the best way to help figure that out is to talk to people who are already doing it. Now, let's change the facts. Let's say you do know what you want to do. And you go to a CLE about it. Again, who's going to be there? A room full of people who do exactly what you want to do and will have advice for you that will never come in through the doors of the school during breaks in the action. Say to people around you, you know something? I'm still in law school. I want to do this when I get out. Can you give me some advice about breaking into it, right? They'll be right there with advice for you, with business cards. Lawyers love to give advice, right? And you know what, they're going to help you out? Because lawyers remember law school, and they respect a student who goes to a class they don't have to attend, right? Now, how do you use CLEs on your resume? Directly below your legal education, put a section called Additional Legal Education and list the CLEs you've been to. What better way to prove your enthusiasm for what you want to do than by showing you've taken a few hours to learn more about it? You know, lawyers aren't stupid. They know you can say anything in an interview. Oh, since I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a litigator, international, fill in the blank lawyer, right? But if it's on your resume, it's got credibility. On top of that, if you're going to apply for jobs electronically, many times employers are going to be doing keyword searches of your resume. The keywords may not show up in your education, but they are likely to show up in the names of the CLEs. It will help you get through an initial screening interview. While I'm talking about the internet, I don't generally like the idea of just posting your resume on the internet to get a job. It's a very low percentage job search technique. But I'll tell you one thing that I have heard success with law students around the country. Many local bar associations have chat rooms where lawyers will chat with each other, and a lot of times, if you go to those chat rooms, you'll notice someone saying, you know, we could really use help doing this or that or the other. And if you're paying attention to those chat rooms, I know students who've jumped in and said, well, I'm glad to hear that you need somebody who does this. I'm still in school. I'd be happy to help you out with it. It's a place where most law students don't look for jobs, and that's why it's a good place to look for jobs. Now, I'm talking about your resume and your image, hobbies and interests. Very controversial, especially in a tight job market. I would encourage you to put hobbies and interests on your resume, and I'll tell you why. I've helped with a number of employers who say, you know, it was something in the hobbies and interests section that caught our eye and made us bring a student in for an interview. Now, why is it controversial? I believe one very good reason for this is that it's one section of your resume that requires a significant degree of judgment. The idea is to intrigue employers, not freak them out, right? Taxidermy, no. Body piercing, no. Star Trek fans, no. Oh, I know. You know, I think that old show is cute too, but if you put Trekkie on your resume, they think you're going to show up at the interview in costume, ready for a convention, right? If you have any question that your hobby or interest is too much of an outlier, go to Career Services, talk about it before you send out your resume. But in general, it's one section of your resume where you can show more personality, and I encourage you to do that. Now, if you have questions about resumes when we get to question and answer, please ask them. But I want to move on because I want to talk about the other thing that employers want from you, because it's something we frequently overlook, and it is crucial to a successful job search. They need to know that they like you and want to work with you. The dirty little secret of job search is this. If you give them an opportunity to know you and like you, they will often convince themselves that you can do the work. It is that crucial. Now, when we traditionally think about employers getting a chance to meet us, we think about interviews. We should think about other things I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. We think about interviews. In 5 minutes, I'm going to give you the 4 rules you need for conducting brilliant interviews now and for the rest of your career. Now, what do we need to know about interviews? You need to focus on and remember what's going on in an interview. The interviewer is sitting there for 20 minutes looking at you and asking themselves one question and one question only. Do I want to work with you? And what do they need to see in return? Enthusiasm. Now, when I say enthusiasm in an interview, do I mean you have to have the puppy dog personality? Oh, I'll get the frisbee! I'll get the frisbee! Of course not. When I say enthusiasm in an interview, I am largely talking about showing the employer that you cared enough about this interview to prepare ahead of time. Prepare. Now, I know what you're going to say. Say, Kim, I'm really busy. I know that. I'm talking about maybe 15 minutes for an interview. It's well worth it. I'm going to show you exactly what to do with that 15 minutes. And on top of that, a lot of law students say to me, I want to prep for interviews. I want to be fresh. You know what I say to that? No, you don't. You want the job, right? And that takes 15 minutes worth of preparation. You need 4 things. The first one is obvious. 85% of people don't do it. Research. Simple research. Go to the employer's website. Look and see. Where are their offices? What are their specialties? Look at their press releases. Look and see what's important to them. Google them. Look them up in LexisNexis and Westlaw. See if they've been in the news recently. You know, a good CLE to go to. If there's a particular firm you want to work for, you know, go to their website and see which CLEs their partners are going to be teaching. And then you go to that CLE with your resume. Walk up to them afterwards and say, you know, I was really glad to hear you speak. You are just as brilliant as I thought you'd be. I'd love to work with you, right? And I've talked to students who've gotten jobs that way. Now, I have seen people get busted on not having research on employers over and over again. And the problem with it is this. If you are busted in an interview, not knowing something simple about the employer, they're going to question how much you wanted the job. If you didn't know this about them. My favorite story about it comes from Oklahoma. A law student there who got out of first year in a very enviable position. He was number 1 in his class, and he thought with those credentials, all he would have to do is waltz into law school second year, and every employer who came to his school would want to interview him because who else would they want? He's number 1 in the class. He's the man, right? He's right. They all wanted to talk to him. The very first employer who came to his campus, very large, prestigious law firm from Kansas City, this law student walks into this interview. He's marginally confident. Are you kidding? He's Austin Powers, right? Very first question the interviewer asks him, he looks at this student and he says, so, what do you know about our firm? So he goes, well, I know you're in Kansas. The interviewer stands up, holds out his hand, says, thank you for coming. We're in Kansas City, Missouri. Wrong state. Hard to convince that you want the job. If you don't know what state the office is in, right? Basic stuff. What else do you research? The interviewer. If you are talking about an on-campus interview or a job fair, call the employer a day ahead and see who they're sending to do the interview. Now, again, with researching the interviewer, don't take much time. You don't have to cyberstalk the person, but you do need to find out basic things about them. You want to find out stuff you can bring up in the interview, make conversation, maybe you have something in common. Most employer websites will have attorney profiles. Those work well. You can look them up in Martindale Hubble online at martindale.com. Now, what do you want to see? Where they're from, where they went to college, what their major was, where they went to law school, any significant activities during law school. My favorite story about this, a law student looked up her interviewer online. She noticed that he had published a law review note while he was in school. She shepherdized the note while she was online. It took her 30 seconds. She found that this guy had published a law review note while he was in school. And when she shepherdized it, she found that a couple of judges recently had mentioned this guy's note in their opinions. She downloaded the 2 mentions of his note, slipped them into her portfolio on the way into the interview, and while they were getting acquainted at the beginning, she said to the interviewer, you know, I could not help noticing that you published a law review note while you were in school. Did you know that a couple of judges recently have mentioned your note in their opinions? He said, I had no idea. She said, I thought you might say that. I brought them with me. She said, Kim, after that, I could have thrown up on this guy. I knew I was going to get the job. He was so excited. He got out his cell phone. He's calling all his friends. Oh, my God, guess what happened? Guess what happened? She said, I didn't have to be in the room. Now, what does this tell you about interviews? Who else is in the room with you? It is a flesh and blood human being. And never forget this about human beings. They don't make rational decisions. They make emotional decisions. If you were the interviewer, who would you rather work with? Who would you rave about your colleagues? Her or Kansas, right? No contest. Now, the second thing you need for interviews, you need to have prepared and rehearsed an answer to the following question. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself is not an invitation to launch into a mini autobiography. Well, I was born in London. I have 3 brothers and sisters. Beep, 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 beep. No, it's not. What it is the following question in disguise. Give me the reasons to hire you. Now, how do you prepare for that answer? From your research, whether it's their website, talking with career services, upperclassmen or alums who've worked there, or an employer like it, you look at the skills and qualities they look for in people they hire. You look at 3 of those that you genuinely have and an experience showing you exhibiting that skill or quality, and you memorize that response. What is the key thing about it? These are good things about you. And what can make that tough? You may have noticed that law school is not exactly America's most self-esteem building graduate program. Am I right about that? And I'm telling you, when you turn around and go into interviews, you've got to say great things about yourself. Yes! And you know why? Because you're not being followed through life by a press agent. Your parents are not following you into interviews, saying, oh, hire him, he's a genius. Hire her, trust him, she's great. They need to hear these things. They need to hear them from you. If you don't feel comfortable saying these things, practice in front of a mirror until you are. On top of that, this answer will bail you out of a lot of situations in interviews that are set up to trap you. You may have interviewers say to you, well, you know something, we're talking with the student who's number one in your class. Why should we hire you over them? You know, we're interviewing for this job at Harvard and Yale and Stanford, wherever. Why should I hire you over one of them? That is a trap. They want to see if you're going to fall in and say something negative about anybody else. That is not the opportunity to say, oh, you're interviewing number one in the class? Well, after you see this blackmail Polaroid, you're not going to want him anymore, right? What you do in that situation is say, you know something? I can't comment on any other student. I can't comment on any other school, but I can give you the reasons to hire me and give them that answer. The third thing you need for interviews, questions to ask, questions to ask. I would encourage you to ask two kinds of questions. Number one, ask questions you've dug up as a result of your research, whether it's talking with people, their website, whatever. Show off the fact you've done the research. On top of that, I encourage you to ask a class of questions that'll help you in a way you may not realize you need in an interview. You know, you should be looking at the interviewer and thinking, do I want this job? It's a two-way street. Now, a lot of times, students will say to me, like, how do I know if I'm going to like this particular job? Again, it's your life there on a day-to-day basis. It's not the name on the door. Ask the interviewer, how do you like your job? What do you like about it? Why did you choose it? What would you change about it if you could? How did you choose your specialty? How did you choose this firm? Watch their reaction and listen to their response. If you want balance in your life, if you have a family or you intend to have a family, or you have hobbies you like to pursue, or you just like the idea of seeing daylight on a regular basis, and you ask the interviewer what they like about their job, and they say, we like to work hard, and we like to play hard. They all say that. We like to close the office early, every Friday at 7, and have a happy hour. Now, they will tell you all the time how family-friendly they are, how collegial they are, but if their idea of early Friday is 7, and I've heard that answer, you know what normal is the rest of the week, right? And if long hours are not negotiable for you, you will hate the job. And P.S., they won't love you. Now, the last thing you need for interviews, remember I told you there were 4, research, tell me about yourself, questions to ask. The last thing you need for interviews is the very most difficult thing there is about interviewing. It's dealing with anything you consider an Achilles heel. We all have things we do not want interviewers to bring up. And what do we traditionally do with those things? Do we prepare? Of course not. You know, how did I prepare for mine? What was my Achilles heel? Well, Kimmy, if you're such a genius, why didn't your summer employer make you an offer? How do we prepare for things like that? The way I did. I rubbed my lucky rabbit's foot. I prayed. I rubbed Buddha's tummy. I hoped against hope that they were somehow going to forget to bring it up, right? Hard to relax and give a good interview when you're horrified about the questions they're going to ask you. The strategy that you use for dealing with anything you consider an Achilles heel is always the same, and it's something you know works from another aspect of your life. The aspect I'm talking about, those ads you see on television for prescription drugs, you've heard those, right? Ask your doctor about it. Now, my brother and I love talking about those ads because we love the side effects. That's our favorite part, right? Now, he lives in Chicago, and he's seen an ad I haven't seen. You may have seen it here. It starts out, it has an irresistible hook. It starts out, and it says, do you feel uncomfortable around large groups of total strangers? Good market. From what I can tell, it is every adult in the United States of America, right? It goes on, and it says, you may be suffering from social anxiety disorder. Oh, alrighty then. Now he goes on and sings the praises of some drug. I don't know the name of the drug. I will call it Shinox. It extols the benefits of Shinox, and it winds up by saying, of course, Shinox is not for everybody. Side effects may include nausea, tremors, sweating, and explosive, unpredictable bowel movements. Now, I don't know how nervous you were before about meeting people, but don't you think the threat of explosive, unpredictable bowel movements will put a serious crimp in your social life? Now, you remember that Tony said he must have seen that ad half a dozen times before he heard those words. Why is that? They don't want you to. That's why they use that voice and that music. It carries you along. You start thinking, well, I'm going to ask my doctor about that, right? The same principle applies in interviews. It is not the Achilles heel you have that will kill you. It's the way you talk about it. Interviewers tell me all the time, they say, you know something? I don't go into an interview with an agenda. I am not looking for blood in the water. I will ask what I think is a perfectly innocent question, and the look on the student's face will tell me everything I need to know. So, how are your grades? Grades? Defibrillator pads clear. Boom. That does not inspire confidence in employers. For anything you consider an Achilles heel, look at the issue behind the question, formulate and memorize an answer to that. I will use grades because I hear about grades once or twice or 5,000 times a week, right? What is the issue behind the grades question? Are you competent? Of course you're competent. I don't care about your GPA, but if the God of grades doesn't smile on you, what do? You answer with what shows you are competent. Maybe you got a rough start first semester, but after that, you figure out the exam thing, your grades go up. It happens to a lot of students. Congratulations. Talk about the upward trend. Think about what you can do for them, not what you did coming in. Maybe your grades overall aren't wonderful, but you do grading classes related to what they do. You want to be a prosecutor. You do grading crim law, crim pro, moot court, trial tactics. Talk about that. Maybe your grades overall chump, but you get great experience. Volunteer or paid, working for a judge or a state agency or a federal agency. Talk about that. You see what I'm talking about. It is not the Achilles heel you have that will kill you. It's the way you talk about it. For anything you consider an Achilles heel, prepare the answer in advance. By the way, for you guys who have to leave, for class right now, watch this on videotape, the rest of it, because we're getting to the most important part. Okay. What we're going to talk about, so that's interviewing. And you see what I'm talking about. Prepare ahead of time. And nothing can happen in there that's going to catch you off guard. The last thing I want to talk about is the most important part of the seminar. It's what I call the birds and bees of jobs. Where do great jobs come from? Now, when I was at Case Western, I believed that every great job in America came in through the doors of the law school every fall and went to the people in the top 5 or 10% of the class who were the only ones who got those interviews. I couldn't have been more wrong. Most great jobs in America will not come into school to find you. Now, how do you get those jobs? Do you do sleazy oleaginous used car salesman? Hey, how you doing? Do you do things that make your skin crawl? No, you don't. But in order to nail down great opportunities that don't come here to find you, you've got to do 2 simple things starting now and for the rest of your life, and they are simple. Number 1, the moment you have an idea of what it is that you want to do, you have got to tell every single person you know what it is. No matter how unlikely it is, you think they know anybody who can help you out. You've got to tell everybody. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to shake hands with a person near you. Shake hands. Just like church or temple. They're doing it. Shake hands with one other person. Okay, they're doing it metaphorically. Congratulations, you know at least 2 people. I go to law schools all over America, and you know what law students always say to me? Kim, I have nobody to tell. I don't know anybody. My parents don't know anybody. I was raised by wolves, right? You know what I have always said to that? You know your classmates. You see them in this building every day. Do we tell our classmates what we want? Based on what I hear around the country, the answer is no, and it's a mistake. I guarantee you, a third of you in here see someone in this building every day who's in a position to help you out and be happy to help you out, but they don't know what you want. It happens at every law school I go to. I was at the University of California at Davis. A first year came up to me. He said, Kim, I am dying to get into entertainment law. Entertainment. There's one I never hear about, particularly not in California, right? And it turns out I knew a third year at UC Davis. I said, you've got to contact this guy. He's Mr. Entertainment, right? He'll hook you up. Anyway, I found out what happened later with that. He told me, he said, you know what? He said, I contacted that third year, and he said, he was really helpful. He said, he told me, you know what you need to do? He said, you need to do something law students never think of doing. You need to go to television writers conferences in Los Angeles. He said the reason for that is a lot of people don't realize that most television writers are disgruntled former lawyers. He said if you go to one of these things and mention you're a lawyer, it'll break the ice. Trust me, it'll work. He said, I didn't have much faith in this. He said, but I went to it anyway. He said, I went to one of these conferences. Sure enough, I'm chatting at the beginning. He said, I mentioned I'm in law school. He said, sure enough, a couple of people I'm talking to, oh my God, I went to law school. They started reminiscing about law school. Through that one conference, he nailed down his summer job, which was interning on the set of West Wing. Tell your classmates. Who else do you tell? Career services. What a wacky thought. When I was at Case Western, my career services office may as well have been the Emerald City for all the time I spent there. I didn't have to go because I know what they did. They ran on-campus interviews in the fall for people in the top 5 or 10% of the class, and then they took off to the Caribbean for the rest of the year and drank drinks out of pineapples. Because God knows I was unemployed. Mistake. Most of what career services can do for you has nothing to do with those stinking on-campus interviews. It's just the most visible thing. They can brainstorm with you about ideas I could never come up with for you. You know, your career services director here, Joan King, she is a legend in career services around the country. Megan, who started working with you this year, she's got a wealth of experience. Use them, but they can't help you if you don't tell them what you want. Tell them. Who else do you tell? Every time anyone sets foot on this campus to make a presentation to you, whether it's a panel or an individual speech about anything you're interested in, instead of just going to it and listening to them, bring your resume with you. When they're done speaking, go up to them, introduce yourself, tell them how much you enjoyed hearing what they had to say, tell them you'd love to do what they do, and ask for their advice about breaking into it, and hand them your resume. You know, when I got the question from the student about how you networked your way into the CIA, I called the CIA and I asked that same question. And they said, you know something? They said, we send people around the country to make presentations at law schools about working for the CIA. And they said, when we have students come up to us with their resume and express honest enthusiasm for working with us, we will cut through all the red tape, take their resume back to the person who makes callback decisions, and tell them to bring the student in for a callback interview. That's how you network your way into the CIA, right? Who else do you tell? You tell every person in your life you would never think of telling. The people in your life who just by dint of the job they have are automatically in contact with a bunch of people. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about your dentist, your doctor, your family's insurance agent, your barber, your hairdresser. You go to the same place for coffee every day, tell the person behind the counter. I've heard millions of these stories. I'll tell you one. Female law student, she is dying to clerk for a particularly prestigious female judge. She tries everything. She can't get through to this woman. Student goes to get her hair cut. While she's getting her hair cut, the hairdresser says, so how's law school going? The student says, I'm beating my head against the wall. I'm trying to get a job with Judge so-and-so. Hairdresser stops. She says, are you kidding, Judge so-and-so? And the student says, no, why? Hairdresser says, well, Trixie does her nails. Points to a manicurist along the wall, right? Student finishes getting her hair cut. She goes over, she taps Trixie on the shoulder. She says, is it true you do Judge so-and-so's nails? Trixie says, yeah, why? She says, when does she come in? She has a standing appointment, Fridays at noon. Student turns to the manicurist in the next chair. She says, are you available Fridays at noon? Yeah, sign me up, right? She shows up Friday at noon. Guess who's sitting in the next chair? Judge so-and-so. Now, I don't expect you men to appreciate this manicure culture, but I think you women can agree with me. When you're getting your nails done, is there anything to do but talk to the person in the next chair? No. This judge turns to the student. She introduces herself, and she says, so what do you do? The student says, well, I'm in law school. How about you? I'm a judge. No! Wow, that must be great! Right now, I don't know why it was. Over the space of the next couple of weeks, that this judge didn't notice that this student seemed to know an awful lot about her career, but she didn't. A couple of weeks go by, and the judge says, I don't know if you have plans for the summer. Would you like to come work for me? Oh, I'll think about it. Because she told her hairdresser? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, Kim, isn't that charming? It's serendipity, right? You know something? I have flown on over 1,000 commercial airline flights in the last couple of years, and every time I talk to the person in the seat next to me about what they do and how they got into it, it's never because they had some stinking interview at school and they're still doing it. Inevitably, it's because when they were ready to make a move, even if it was the first move, they took the simple step of not keeping their dreams a secret. The biggest favor you can do for the rest of your life is to tell people already know you and like you what it is you want. You know, when they put you on to other people, your first communication is crucial. Your first communication, be it by email, snail mail, or voicemail, has got to start with the following 7 words. So-and-so, that counts as 2 words. Recommended that I contact you. So-and-so recommended that I contact you. Why is it so important to remember this? You know, when we get on to people through other people, it's easy to feel skeevy and dirty, like we cheated, right? Don't kid yourself. Human beings are naturally risk averse. And when you mention the name of someone they recognize and it opens your communication, They'll feel as though someone else has checked you out first, and that gives them comfort. Mention that name first. Now, the other thing you have to do for the rest of your career, remember I said there were two. The other thing you do for the rest of your career, activities you take part in. Now, activities you take part in for your career have got to have two qualities in common. The first one is fairly obvious. You do things where people you want to work with or people who can put you onto them are likely to congregate. In law, what are we talking about? We're talking about alumni events. We're talking about bar association activities. We're talking about CLEs. We're talking about conferences, seminars, right? In other industries, if you want to use your law degree to do something non-traditional, go to career services, look at the big yellow book of trade associations, look up the trade association for the industry that interests you, contact them, and ask them about the activities they have, the parallel ones in law. Every industry has them. Now, the other quality activities have to have is crucial, and we never think about it. Activities you take part in for your career have got to be things you enjoy. Because when you do things you enjoy, you naturally relax and shine and attract people to you. And that's what I want to have happen to you. Why don't we do things that are good for our careers? It's the large groups of total strangers, isn't it? Something might be wonderful for your career, but you're uncomfortable around meeting strangers. We all are. And what happens in that situation? You talk yourself out of it, don't you? All of a sudden, when the thing's going to start, your sock drawer has to be rearranged, and it's got to be rearranged right now, right? Now, how do you make any activity that would be good for your career into something you'll enjoy? Do what the first student I told you about did. Instead of just going to it, find out who's organizing it, call ahead, and volunteer to help out. Every event you can imagine needs volunteers. I don't care if it's pouring the punch, I don't care if it's handing out name tags, I don't care if it's giving people tours of the building, picking them up at the airport, summarizing the proceedings. If you have a role to play, it breaks the ice for you. It makes people easy to talk to. I was talking to a student in North Carolina who had just nailed down a summer job in San Diego. I don't know if you know much about San Diego. It's a gorgeous city with a legal community this big, right? I asked her how she nailed down this job. She said, Kim, you wouldn't believe how easy it was. She said, I contacted the San Diego Bar Association, and I asked them when their annual golf outing was going to be, and I volunteered to help out. She said, you got online, you got a cheap airline ticket. They assigned her the job of driving a golf cart for some of the most prestigious lawyers in San Diego. And she said between holes they were chatting. And these lawyers said to her, well, what do you do? What are you up to? And she said, as a matter of fact, I go to law school in North Carolina, but I'm going to be relocating here after graduation. I wanted to come out for the day and get familiar with the legal community. She said she wound up the day with a stack of business cards this thick from lawyers who had volunteered to help her find a job. Now, I have a question for you. Does the idea of riding around in a golf cart on a golf course in San Diego strike you as a difficult way to find a job? Me neither. What else do you do? Starting right now, get into a habit that's going to help you for the rest of your career. Take half an hour a week to skim the publications you would be reading if you were already doing whatever it is. What publications am I talking about? Well, in law, it's fairly obvious. Get on mailing lists with bar associations. You want to read local bar publications. You want to read specialty publications, state bar publications, the business sections of the local newspaper. See when people are going to open up new branches of law firms in town, when they're having open houses, things like that. Now, among other things you can do with these articles, when you read profiles of people who do anything you want to do, contact them. Send them an email or a note and say, you know something, I just read about you in X publication. I would love to do what you do. I'd love to follow in your footsteps. Can you give me some advice about breaking into it? Now, will everybody respond to you? Of course not. But we make a big mistake in life when we underestimate the value of honest flattery. Now, you guys here, some of you definitely know this. You remember who Don Larson was? Who was Don Larson? Anybody a baseball fan? Guy who... Perfect game in the World Series. He's right. You know, someone asked him, good answer. A reporter asked him a couple of years ago, you know, don't you get tired of people asking you about pitching that perfect game in the World Series? You know what his answer was? Why would I? People love to talk about themselves, and saying to someone, I want to be like you, can't be a more flattering thing to say. Some people will respond to you, right? And in fact, my favorite story about this comes from here in New York, about a law student here who was interested in getting into international law, another international story. He kept his eye on the local newspapers, and he noticed there was going to be a conference on trade with South Africa taking place in New York. That's specifically the area he wanted to get into. He went to it, he noticed the keynote speaker standing alone for a couple of minutes. He walked up to the guy, and he said, you know, I have always wanted to work with South Africa. Hearing you speak has inspired me all the more. Can you give me some advice about it, maybe names of people to contact? He said the guy was very gracious, wrote down a couple of names for him. I said, that's fantastic. Who was it? He said, Nelson Mandela. Moderately useful South African contact, would you agree? Dear so-and-so, Nelson Mandela recommended that I contact you. That's letter to send, right? Now, I could go on and on, but you see what I'm talking about. Think about things you will enjoy that will coincidentally get you in touch with people who can help you. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you is what you say to people when you meet them. It's crucial that you say the right things and avoid saying the wrong things. When you meet people, you have got to ask for things. Now, the one thing you cannot ask people for is a job. It's probably something you feel uncomfortable asking for anyway. Now, why can't you ask for that? For a simple reason. When you meet people, they are rarely in a position to make you an offer on the spot. And when you ask people for things they can't give you, it makes them uncomfortable. But people are always in a position to give you three things that lead directly to jobs. They are advice, information, and referrals. AIR. Advice, information, referrals. Now, how are you going to break into that conversation? You may have read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't, I'm going to summarize it for you in one sentence. Get people to talk about themselves, and they will love you, right? So when you meet people, what do you do? If you don't know what they do, ask them, what do you do? What do you like about it? How did you choose it? What would you change about it if you could? Remember the interview questions I told you about before? Now what's going to happen? It's not going to be a one-way street. They're going to say to you, well, what do you do? What do you want to do? And if what you want to do is what they do, you say, as a matter of fact, I'd love to do what you do. Can you give me some advice about breaking into it? Where can I find out more about it? Who else should I talk to, right? Now, if it's not what they do, tell them anyway. You don't know who they know. In a larger sense, what's going on here? How did you find this person? You told people what you wanted. You did things where they happen to be. You took the initiative. And initiative is the embodiment of enthusiasm. I can't tell you the great jobs you will have throughout your career, but I can promise you this. If you keep your feet moving in a strategic way, you will always be happier, wealthier, and more successful than people who don't. That's everything I have to tell you. Does anybody have any questions for me? Anybody? I know it's almost dinner time, but hey.